Can you hear me, Natasha?
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. So I'm very happy to be here with you. Um, and I mean, I just don't even know how to explain how excited I am for us to be in conversation today. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
Same here. So
And you just out here doing your thing, and like we're family. We're basically family. I don't even know how many decades I've known you now, and I just want to have this intimate dialogue. So normally sometime around this time I'm normally planning a festival where that you I've been honored to have your voice at in Idlewild, and with COVID I've kind of shifted this year to just be in dialogue with artists that I deeply respect. And sometimes I have the benefit of them also being like family. And so we had Heather J on yesterday.
oh,
We have you on today. We have Nadine, aka Mars, coming up. One Single Rose. We have this extremely talented, interesting artist called American Artist. I'm not sure if you're familiar with American Artists, but they fuse technology and poetry and all these things together. And so we're going to have them coming up. We're going to have Sandy Land, and we're going to have Michael McDaniel, and just so
oh, you
many other people. And
got
I'm just like, yeah, I'm super excited. And I see Jeff Nelson on here, so no pressure, but I think I'll be reaching out to Jeff Nelson soon. It's been a while.
gotta
Um, yeah, yeah. And so we are live streaming on YouTube. We are also on Zoom, and this will be also loaded on Petty Propolis YouTube after the fact. And so I want to be succinct
yeah.
and basically just get right into the dialogue.
Yeah.
What have you been up to? Like, how are you navigating all the things? We're in a pandemic. There's racial strife. There's just so much going on in the world, and you've already been a phenomenal artist who's kind of brought what's happening in the world into your art, whether it be personal, whether it be societal. How has your art shifted in this moment, or has it?
Yeah. I mean, to answer the question, like, I think that we're always, because I know you both up to something, right? And I think that when it comes to what I've been doing in my art, you look at where I started as just like, this 21-year-old kid, because you met me when I was 21. And when she said we've been knowing each other for decades, that kind of ages us. So yeah, I never tell my age, I always hide it. I just started as this kid who was coming into poetry spots, just doing poems on stage, a spoken word artist, right? That's just really all it was. Now where I'm at in my career, there's obviously been a big shift. With Butcher, I'm an author, an actual author, an actual published author, from a big publishing company. And I never saw that for myself, right? I just thought I was always just going to be rocking these stages, telling these stories. I didn't think my art would evolve into something that somebody can actually like take home with them and open up and share with other people. But aside from that, I've grown as just a human and an artist and an activist. Over the summer during the pandemic, it was a lot going on here. But then I decided to, connect with Detroit Will Breathe. And then I started something called the Protega, which is your protest friendly bodega, where, people was just able to come and before they went off into, to marching downtown, they were able to get free food, free water, free tampons, free anything you could imagine that you would need to go and protest. So kind of like men and things like that. I'm also a parent. I'm also, like all of these different things that I didn't see for myself when we were first stepping foot into poetry spots. And yeah, I think the biggest shift has been me just really, really telling my story and focusing on my story being about grief and not like shying or running away from that. So in these last few years, I feel like my whole life, any conversation that I've entered into has been about grief. And I've kind of held on to that.
Yeah, yeah. And I was saying to you before we got online is that I'm reading this tremendous book, Butcher. And I was like, there are poems in here that are like, oh, hit you in the gut. But then you turn to the next poem and it's like salve for that injury you just
Okay.
got from the other poem. Like, okay, okay. And
Yeah,
so
okay.
we're going to talk a bit about this in a second, but I know that folks want to know what Whitney is doing behind you.
Oh my goodness. I think you've been knowing this about me for years, and that's the great part about the conversation. I've always been obsessed with Whitney Houston. When I was like 7 or 8 or 10 or something like that, I thought I was going to marry Whitney Houston. This is before I even knew I was a lesbian. And for some reason, I just was like, I love this woman so much. And then as I got older, I really started to see Whitney Houston in some of like my family members. Like I always thought one of my aunts kind of reminded me of her. Then I also thought like the way that Whitney Houston battled with like addiction and I saw that in my mom, right? Like you can battle with this addiction, but she was also just great and good at what she did at the same time. And she was just so authentically herself, whether right or wrong in certain spaces. And I just had this obsession with her. And I brought my house in 2018, and I just always thought like this was a woman who, I know she got a lot of flowers, but I feel like, towards the end of her life, it was more jokes on her than anything else. And I just felt like she didn't get the credit she deserved for the amazing and wonderful things she did, or she didn't get the respect. So for me, it was like, how can you do this? What can you do to pay homage to her? And I hooked up with Igena Cortez, as soon as I moved into the house, Black queer artist from Detroit, and was like, put her on the wall, put her on the wall. But when you come around the house, you didn't send me Whitney notebooks. My auntie bought me a Whitney shower curtain. My cousin sending me like Whitney Houston albums that's never been like remastered. And just so she's really all throughout the house. And the older that I get, the more I start to understand that it was much more than like a crush you were experiencing on this woman. It was something that deeply resonated, and it was for a reason. So I'm starting to like unpack all of those reasons. And as I unpack them, she's sitting right here next to me.
She watching you and helping you unpack, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, oh look, when I transition, she's gonna be the first one I find. Sorry, Marcus.
Excuse me, I'm here looking for Whitney.
Yeah, I'm sorry. They're like, did you lose your brother a few years ago? I'm like, yeah, he waited this long. Where's Whitney at? All right, I'll see you in a minute. That's it.
I really want people to understand, like, this is a portrait that is on your wall of your home.
Yeah.
So this isn't a virtual background, y'all. This is a beautiful, real looking portrait that is massive on the wall.
Yeah, it gives the house flavor. It gives the house flavor for sure.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, just hooking up with Igena, it was like whatever was in my head. We didn't even know what picture we was gonna go for. It kind of just took us a few days, like, which one do you want? But it's like, how you see something without seeing it. Yeah. And then when she put it on the wall, it was like, this is exactly what was in my head. So also just working with a phenomenal artist who knows what to do has made the process so much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. Whitney was Greatest Love of All was the first solo I ever sang. Now I'm pretty sure it's the first solo anybody ever sang, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember my 5th grade graduation, Count on Me Through Thick and Thin. They played that, her CC, and I just bawled. And every time I hear the song, I just remember me, count on me through thick and thin. I was like, this just like,
oh, love it. So you mentioned your brother, and there is homage in your book, Butcher, to not only your brother, but also your young person that you're raising, which is your brother C, Carlito, which I have to tell everybody that I was the first person to hear Carlito speak. Now, I want you all to know that this, normally you'd be like, oh, you heard Carlito's first words. How old was Carlito? 3, 4? No, 3 months. 3 months old.
Yep. You didn't hear him. You taught him the word.
Well, or you could say it like that, like I taught. Yeah, I didn't think that Carlito would actually respond with the actual word at 3 months, but Carlito did. So I'm just amazed by him. And he's a light, and he's brilliant and funny and witty. And he gets that from you and his dad. And do you want to talk a little bit about, like, you talked about grief, and you've done a lot of things to pay homage to your brother, and similar to Whitney, right? Like to reclaim the narrative of the ways that we are forced to endure this society. And you talk about that in Butcher. And so I'm wondering if it's not too difficult, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, you know the story of my brother. And to those of you who don't know, my brother was murdered in 2013 in Detroit. And, it was a difficult time. He was murdered, always, tell it this way, 3 days before New Year's, 3 days after Christmas, was cremated on my birthday. His funeral was the day after my birthday. So it was a lot of heaviness in that. And that's my big brother, same mother, same father, best friends, grew up together, right? And you could tell the connection because I have taken on his seed. But in my brother's death, which a lot of the poems in Butcher talk about this, I felt like there was no space for me to be sad about it because people just felt like, it's expected. In the book, I say, like, they say the drug dealers stood on the tracks their whole lives, challenging the train, knew that even if the weather delayed it, death was still showing up at their front door, right? Like, this thing is coming. And I felt it for years, like, oh, I know because of the life that my brother lived that he's going to get murdered, right? Or something bad is going to happen. And there was nothing I could do to prevent that. It was nothing, not the praying. That was something that he was fighting with. But once that fight ended, I just felt like it was this space where it's like, nah, you should have expected it. So you shouldn't be that sad about it. He did bad things in the world, so you shouldn't feel that bad about it. And I did have to reclaim that space. I had to realize, like, first of all, we're talking, and I know you're going to hate this. I got the trash can that you just say open can and it opens up, or you walk by it and it opens up. And I'm talking to you about my brother, and the can just opened up, just so you're very clear about that, and nobody is over there. So yeah. Yes.
See, y'all, that surveillance stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna let you.
Yeah, no, I'm throwing it all away. So, or he's just walking by the can right now. Like, y'all talking about me?
Very true.
Yeah. So, it was really me in these last, and it took a minute to get here, but in these last like 4 or 5 years, just embracing that, grief can be a struggle, but it can also be a beautiful thing if you use it as a resource to help other people with their grief. So I came into that space like, Marcus is, he's gone, he's dead. And you see the poem in there where I talk about he's dead, he's gone, his death. He's dead, and there's nothing that I could do about that. The only thing I could do about it post-death that would make me feel better and heal others is to just tell the story of him and the story of it like it was, and not try to alter anything. I talked to somebody about Butcher, and they talked about just how raw it is. But you and I know, I think all of our poetry over these past few years have been very raw. Like, this is the thing, this is what it is. I'm not trying to metaphor my way out of it. I'm not trying to make it look prettier than it is. So with Butcher, even the title, it was like, this is what it is. This is how I feel, but this is how I was able to overcome it. So, losing him was really difficult for me, in so many ways, so many things that I struggled with that kind of sparked off some sort of like, addictive personality in me. I was finding all of these different things. I was chasing all of these things to avoid what I was feeling. And then I woke up one day and decided, like, oh, you got to do something healthy. You got to do something healthy. And that healthy is writing these poems, getting to this book, honoring your brother, raising his son, being a good parent, being a good person, and then doing all of this grief work in the community. The Science of Grief with the DIA, the Science of Grief. I'm producing a podcast right now in partnership with Science Gallery and WDET. So I took all of that pain from my brother. I honored him by telling his story. I think that he would be very proud that I tell people exactly who he was. I have no sugarcoating in that. But then he's also like, but you put some sort of positive spin on it. So I think that has been my journey.
That, what, it makes me think of two things, right? My father died of AIDS, and for a long time, like, we're forced to be ashamed of the ways that the people we love who had the greatest impact on us leave this place. And then you start to learn more about society's impact on the conditions that the people you love had to endure, and how they ended up in these particular situations in the first place, and like systemic racism and just structural inequality and all the things. And then you take on this mission to humanize them. And so it makes me also think about, like, I was watching the trial of George Floyd, and just like the families, and so many families, um agendas to like humanize their loved ones
Yeah.
beyond their death, like to be honest about how they left, to be honest about whether there was any addictions, to be honest about whether or not there was, whatever conditions that our loved ones endured and existed through. But at the end of the day, they were human beings who deserved to be loved,
Yeah.
to deserve to be remembered, who had loved ones who still love them.
Good.
And so I just really have really watched you journey through, traverse that sort of reclaiming Marcus's humanity in
Yeah,
that
I
way.
mean, when I went, when I first started hearing the story of your father, that's one of the first stories where I heard somebody openly say, like, no, my father died of AIDS. Like, you really don't hear that from people. So I think that stories like that have always like sat with me. Even C.R. Freeman, when she talked about like her father being a drug dealer and her father being murdered, and that's something that really connected us closely, and we did the Good Grief tour together. So I just wanted to join that conversation and like, no, like these people were human and did good things too. And they deserve some sort of flowers for the things that they did. And like you just talked about, all the things that contributed to the environment. And I think one of the last poems in the book, I say, you didn't, oh no, actually I cut that poem, but it says, you didn't start this war on drugs. You were a casualty in it. Like, he didn't wake up one day and say like, oh, I just want to sell drugs because it's fun. There were so many other things that contributed to the decisions that he felt like he had to make. But he was just so much more than those decisions. He was a father, and he was a brother, and he was a son, and he liked basketball, and he liked to rap, and he talked to himself a little too much, but he was funny, and he smoked a little weed, but he didn't drink. And there are things that he was fun, and he took me to prom, and he paid for the hotel room, and he bought everybody's dinner at Fishbones, and he, what I'm saying. So it's like, to just minimize him to just the bad things would do him no justice.
Yeah. And I mean, we have to reevaluate what bad is in this
For
society,
that
because
part.
I'm someone who lives with chronic illness, and I'm on a whole lot of drugs that I'm sure are eating my
That,
insides out right now.
okay, yeah.
And I didn't get them from Marcus.
Yeah, sure did.
So
The bad people are still here. Then they do bad
exactly.
things in the name of government and God. So
And honestly, I don't think you cut that poem. I think I read that poem in here, unless you have different editions of this. I believe I read that poem,
you might have.
unless I read it somewhere else, because it's
Yeah.
not like I don't be following you around and like reading your
Oh
poems and
no,
all
you know
these
what I'll be doing.
things and stuff.
I don't think you got to read the poem. It probably was a time where I called you to read the poem to you. Like, oh, I'm reading this poem. It's probably just stuck in your head now.
Yeah, I definitely recall that, and it really sat with me. And so yeah, talk to me about Butcher. Like, what, aside from, because is this your third? I know you've done like chapbooks and other things,
Yeah.
but is this your second official book, or
Well, so
are you
it is, but I like to call it like my first, right? You remember
okay?
I published myself coming out of nowhere, which
Yeah, I have that. Yeah.
feels, yeah, see, I love my friends. They're like, no, I have all this, which I still believe was ahead of its time. It
It
was,
was.
it was what I considered at the time a social networking memoir. And I took all of these conversations, as you recall, that was happening online, just to be a mirror, to show people that they're either somebody else online or they're the worst version of themselves online. And when you get to look in this book and read the things that you say, are you going to reconsider your behaviors on social media, right? But that was something I published, and it wasn't a book of poems.
Yeah. It's
Then,
important. I mean, I don't know if you know how important that book is in a political dialogue, particularly of Facebook right now. So you
yeah,
might want to reconsider like
I think so.
bringing
Like,
it
kind of,
back out.
I agree with that, because I'm like, I don't know if I should just let this go, because I think I was doing a thing with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Right, go ahead.
I self-published. I think that was something that we probably went through. There's a lot of questions I probably asked you at the time. How do I start this? How do I start that? And that was fun. And then the second chapbook, well, the first chapbook I published really wasn't a chapbook, right? It was poems. It was me going to do these shows. It was like, I need to get some money off these shows other than what I'm getting paid. I need a product. So how we do it, guerrilla style, just got put maybe 10, 12 poems, 18 poems in a book, use a logo I had for something else, slapped it on the front of it, stapled
$10.
it every FedEx, and was like, here you go, right? I didn't think I was gonna win no Pulitzer Prizes with it. I didn't think nobody was gonna be quoting it on Instagram. I just need to get my $10 at them shows. And it held me over. And the journey to Butcher was I think it was a really cool one because it was very unexpected, right? I had always said like, I don't want to, and I think it was my own fear of like my own, I don't want to call it greatness, but I was holding myself back. I kept using the excuse like, I don't want to write a book of poems. That's not my journey. What I want to do is just perform and blah, blah, blah. But I think what I was saying is I'm not confident enough to write a book of poems, right? For whatever reasons. And I, Button Poetry and Sam, they're all my friends. And they think that I'm a phenomenal storyteller. So for them, they were like, okay, what if you like worked on a book of stories, which was like my bag. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I love telling stories. And it was difficult to write them though, like when I'm out and I'm kicking it and I'm telling stories and I'm on stage and like, it's easy. Now, when you sit in front of the computer and you got to write the story, it was like, oh shit. Okay. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Right. But I was trying and I was writing it. And honestly, at the same time, I have found this addiction to food. And, I love to cook, and I have been loving to cook since I got back from the military, but I didn't notice that once Marcus passed away, I kind of got in the kitchen a whole lot more, but it was also, I'm growing up, I'm a woman now, I got a kid, I got so I got like my own family. And so I'm cooking a lot. Then I developed like this, I want to be better at cooking. So I get this addiction to Food Network. So all I'm doing is watching Chop, like literally all day long. I would go on them long road trips to do shows. I go perform at college. I go right back to my hotel room and I just turn on Chopped and I just like watch it all night long. Right. So that was kind of seeping into my writing and I didn't know that. So I was writing all of these poems and all of the poems in one way or another mention food. So I go to sleep one night and you probably noticed about me. I remember like all of my dreams. And it's like weird stuff that happens.
I think that's still one of the most tripped. I know one other person who does that, but go ahead.
Yeah, a friend said to me the other day, I was like, yeah, you were in my dream. And she's like, about what? And I started telling her dream. And she's like, you remember all that dream? Like she probably thought I was lying. I was like, no, that was the whole dream. I remember what was said, what happened, like everything. But I'm also a person that, Angelica, we love her. She used to tell me to go and get like these sleep studies because, if my phone is under my pillow and you call me, I won't know that you called me, but you'll be in my dream. And I can wake up and be like, I dreamt about Tawana. And then I look at the phone and I have a missed call from you. So I don't know what it is working, but it's like, if Butcher doesn't sell and I just decide to not be a poet anymore, I'm going to figure out what's up there. So I go to sleep. And while I'm dreaming, I remember that I said to somebody in my dream, I'm going to name my book of poems Butcher. And that friend in my dream said, you can't do that or you'll get sued because there's this Food Network star that has a book out called Butcher. And I was like, oh man, I really want to name my book that, right? Butcher was not, I had no contract for it. I wasn't talking about publishing it with nobody. Again, I was writing a book of stories. It had nothing to do with these poems. Woke up at some point during the day, took a shower. While I was in the shower, I was like, oh wait, you had a dream about a book, about calling it Butcher. You gonna name your book Butcher because that was just a dream, right? So I get up and then I'm like, do you have enough poems to do this? I started going through all of the Instagram poems that I put up, all of the poems that I've been writing recently. Then I realized like, oh, these things are talking about like food and grief all at the same time. So I go to Button Poetry and I'm like, I know you want this thing, but this thing is already here. Yeah. And they were like, Butcher it is, we'll take it. And I was like, okay. And this is what we need. It was a 2-year journey. Safia was my editor, was going back and forth, with the poems. I was writing poems, but it was just such a sweet moment for me to see it all come together, like this life that you found in food and also this life that you found in grief. These two things, they go.
Yeah.
And you got a whole book out of it.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. I'm gonna show it again, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, even the covers,
Beautiful.
even the cover, I wrote a poem about like how that love is like a kitchen full of sacrifice. It was like something in there on my Instagram, and Ebony Hogan ended up, actually, I'm gonna show it to you. She actually did this for me. I'm gonna step away just so you can see. So after Ebony Hogan sees this poem, you know, our girl Ebony from New York,
Yeah.
she does this.
Wow.
Right? This is all before Butcher comes together. So she does this.
Wow.
And, you know, it's the art, it's the food, it's the everything.
Yeah.
So I was like, this should be my book cover. This should be my book cover. So Amy Thatcher, who works with Button Poetry, they were like, you know, do you mind if we basically took Ebony's drawing and then just like added to it, you know, for the sake of the book. So it was kind of like Ebony and Amy together. And then inside of the book, you actually see that we kind of give, you know, homage to Ebony in the book. So yeah, it was just all these pieces that just fell together. Like, oh, I already had the cover, I already had the title, and I already had the poems.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know if it's, I'm gonna switch to view for a second so people can see me. I want y'all to see this incredible. Do you see this book? It's beautiful. It is beautiful. The poems are amazing. And the book itself is beautiful.
Yeah, the Ebony and Amy, they did their thing. Again, it was like the Whitney thing. It was like, when I said Butcher, this is what was in my head. And for some reason, these people were already making it, happen.
Call it into fruition and make it so.
I mean, and it is here.
So, I mean, how about we hear some poems from Butcher?
Yeah.
One or two, or whatever you're feeling.
Okay. Let me see. Here's the funny part about Butcher, and it's the good funny. I don't even have any copies of Butcher right now. So
wow.
Yeah. So, you know, all of the copies come, like when people buy them online, they come from Button Poetry. Right. But Button Poetry, they sent me like 50 author copies to have and to do whatever it is that I wanted to do with them myself. And they're all gone.
Wow. And I know I ordered 5 from them.
Yeah.
And I gave 4 of them away.
Oh, because you got yours straight from
Button.
Button, yeah. So I just sent back and
they come autographed, y'all.
Yep. I just sent back 272 books like 4 days ago. So, you know, I sold out of the first 250 was pre-orders. I don't know where these 272 come from, but they was like, we need to send you 272 more to sign. I mean, I'm forgetting my signature at this point, but I signed it. I sent it back. And it's just fun because I see people like, oh, I picked up Butcher from this independent queer bookstore in Chicago. Oh, I picked up Butcher from Barnes and Noble. I don't know all the places that Butcher is, you know? So it's just, it is where they put it, but to see that it's in these different spaces is amazing. So I like to read poems that I don't always read. So I think it makes sense to read some of the poems that I don't normally get on stage with. So I think I'll start with, and you know how the book is broken down, that a lot of these poems, my mother is the first chapter, then my nephew, then America. So there's a poem that I wrote to my mother, and actually I'm gonna do I See You. And this is just a homage to women and all types of women. And if the only legacy you leave behind are stories of your resilience, if it is only your children telling stories about how their mother was never given a crown but still moved like a queen, if you don't have children and you just come from a lineage of women who sacrificed their bellies to feed this hungry world, that's enough. Let this poem serve as acknowledgement of your royalty. Let this poem be a reminder of how the sky would be dark without all the days you ground your bones to powder just to keep the lights on. Let this poem be the, hey sis, thank you, and I see you. When you become invisible to movements you created, when you've carried sadness 2 times your body weight, yet still showed up to every function smiling, when you felt less than electric, yet somehow still powered others with your purpose. Hey sis, I see you. beautiful. Even when you choose not to smile with or without makeup in boardrooms, rocking skirts or pantsuits, I see you as more than feast. I see you as more than temple or structure. I see you as magic. I see you as Black girl magic. I see you as me too, as time's up, as our time is now. I see you in solidarity with your sisters. I see you always fighting for others. I see you, sister. I see you, mother. I see you, queen. I see you.
Woo! Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I just kind of felt like, again, you get it, like all of the times that people have just like become invisible, and women, we know it, you create it, you start it, and then they don't mention you in it, and you're like, yeah. And it's important that, and that's, I think, even getting to Butcher, Mahogany Brown is the one who actually gave me the idea of like, hey, what if you broke it down into like these sections of a cow? And, I had just all these women in my life who made Butcher possible, who answered the phone, who listened to the poems. So I feel like they need that credit. So the answer is kindness. I'm gonna do this. I wrote this poem probably about 10 minutes before I had to submit my final copy of Butcher to the editor, right?
That's so Natasha.
You know it, right? I call Chevis, and I'm on the phone with her. Chevis, my best friend out in Atlanta, which is funny because now we're playing with the idea of opening a small restaurant called Butcher. So we're thinking about getting her back and doing that. So wow. as I'm talking to her, I'm like, I mentioned my mom and I mentioned like addiction in the book. It starts talking about sangria and these things. And I didn't want my mother to feel like I only see one side of her. The most important side that I've always seen from her, as we know, is how kind she is. I mean, I tell everybody it's the, no
caregiving lie. Kind.
Yeah. Like anything she can give, she's going to give to you. And, that's funny. I was at the gym yesterday and I was in a sauna, and this older gentleman named Larry, white guy, he was like, where have you been? And I was like, well, I have been going to the other gym. And he was like, I've been seeing you come here for years. And I just want to say, you are so nice. You always just stay to yourself. You always just nice to people. You always, and then we got into the story about like my mom and where it came from. And then he started talking about his mom. And he's like, my mom just taught me one thing. You be nice to people, and you keep yourself surrounded with nice people. And if people aren't nice back to you and they're bad people, he said, send them on their way and pray for them. Don't judge them. Just send them on their way and pray for them. And I was like, I needed that, Larry, because sometimes we fall into, these cycles of, and I wouldn't say judgment. I tend to not be a judgmental person, but I am a person who I think that I'm funny. I like to talk through things. I like to, so I recognize things and I talk about them, but sometimes it falls into a cycle of like, oh, this is kind of getting too negative. And just to be reminded of, I keep saying people got their shit. They got their demons. They got their, and it's okay to say it ain't for me, but also I'm gonna pray for you and let you go. So, in that I call Chevis and I'm like, I need to write another poem to my mom. And she's like, well, write it. I'm like, I only got about 10 minutes. She's like, okay, write the poem. And I hung up and was like, okay, called her back in 10 minutes and was like, you want to hear the poem? And she's like, you really just wrote a poem. And I was like, yep.
But no one's actually surprised by that.
I don't know what it is. It's like I'm out the door. Like I always do the show at the the show, the awards gala, the water awards gala at the DSO. And I remember I had a crazy day. I had just performed for Forbes 30 under 30 the night before. The next morning I had to do like the TEDx performance. And then right after that, I had to go to the DSO to do the show. And they wanted me to write a poem about climate change. And I had to get dressed in between Forbes and going to the DSO. Me and my cousin, Micaiah, we came here. And while she's like, I'm like, we only got about 30 minutes. She's throwing her stuff on. I'm trying to throw my stuff on. I'm like, but I have to write this poem. And I get back to the computer, write the poem, go to the DSO, print it out at FedEx real quick, get a standing ovation. It's like, wow.
The audience, so to the folks listening to this, to you all, this is probably like, oh my goodness, which it is, oh my goodness. But if you've been around T for any amount of time, then you know that she goes into national slam competitions, writing and memorizing poems right before hitting the stage. I've witnessed it too many times to count. And I always talk to people about her. I'm like, I know a person who writes and memorizes a poem at the same time and then goes and slams it in a national competition.
Performance. Look, that's what 4:30 into 30 was. Like I was like, I just finished that poem the night before. I was like, let me get so yeah, I did this. And I just felt like even in those moments, I'm like, when I'm writing, it's like I don't have time to manipulate my own feelings, right? If I got to do something and I got to push it out really quickly, the thing that's coming out is the thing that I feel. And like most human beings, you know, you can go back and do the editing that you need to do for whatever project it is you're working on. But like most human beings, if you give me too much time, I'm gonna start to try to make it look good. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, let me just say what it is. So this poem came, you know, in that moment, and it's called The Answer is Kindness. The question is my father. The answer is my mother. Buried her only son alone, pulled holidays out of 80-hour work weeks, feet blistering, hands ashy, teeth white, always smiling. The question is my brother. The answer is my mother. Received the diagnosis early, never seen him as a burden, paid for medicine out of pocket, showed up to every hearing, put money she didn't have on the book, spoke highly of, never gave up on. The question is me. The answer is my mother. A lot of addiction, a lot more of surviving, a brick of confidence, a tree trunk of humility, a tiny home that survived the hurricane, the sharpest knife in any kitchen. The question is kindness. The answer is my mother. More than her demons, heart a vending machine that cost you nothing, the most versatile cut of the cow, the rib, the rib, the rib. The question is kindness. The answer, always, my mother.
Wow, that is so beautiful.
Like that lady is so nice. Let me go.
Yeah. And is that's in the set? Is that I can't recall? That's in the rib section, right?
That's in the rib.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
in the
Talk
rib.
about the breakdown before you go into the next poem. Talk about the breakdown of the book. You did it a little bit, but I found it fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So as I was thinking about, the different cuts of a cow, I was thinking, how do these fit into the story, right? How does what's the narrative, right? I mean, the rib is just the most important thing to anybody, right? Like it's just important. I just felt like your Adam and Eve, just like, from the beginning, nothing would be possible without this rib. So I felt like, yeah, that's my mom. We're all here because of you. And then when I went into the tenderloin, that was just very, obvious. It's like my nephew, like, this is a tender being, like, this is my baby, and you will always be, my baby. And he was my brother's baby when he left. So I just felt like, yeah, the tenderloin belongs to you. Then I thought about the brisket. Like, the brisket is one of the most delicious things, on the cow. Like, it's, and I felt like again, humanizing my brother, I wanted him to feel seen. So it's like, no, you the part everybody going to the barbecue spot for, and then when it came to like just tongue and cheek, I think that was the section that I dedicated to my sexuality and my identity. And so I was just breaking it down in that way. And let's see what else I got. And the round, I felt like the round is the worst part of the meat. That's what you typically don't want to eat. So I said, oh, these poems are going to be dedicated to America and my relationship with this country. I was like, you deserve this part of it. So yeah, and shout out to my colleague Antoine, who obviously you've worked with, because he sat here with me and we were working inside of work. And I was like, I'm trying to, I had printed out like, a cow and all of the different sections. And I just would look at it every day, like, I wonder what part this is. I wonder what part this is. And he sat here with me and we just kind of ping pong back and forth, like, oh yeah, tongue in cheek, that makes sense for sexual identity, trying to figure it out. Kind of like you're a joke, kind of like you're not, it was all these different things. So it was really, looking back on it, because I just put the book out into the world, right? And I just let it do what it does. And me, I'm just like you. Like, we do a project and then we on to the next project, but we never sit down and think about how brilliant was it that you did a thing, and what are all the components that contributed to this thing. So even like you asking me that question about like, no, talk about these 5 different cuts. I've never really talked about the cuts. It's like, and that's important to the book. So people don't need to know like why you named each section is. You would think it was just like a random selection, but it's like, no, I actually thought about like what makes the most sense. And that's how they all 5 came to be.
And I mean, and it trips me out when you say you you dedicated tongue in cheek to like your identity, right? And so that could be interpreted in so many ways, like tongue in cheek, like the way that this world
Mm-hmm.
makes a joke out of our humanity, and then also these parts of the animal, right?
Exactly.
And so
Your
yeah, it's
husband,
just
it's the most
it's
important part of me on the cow. So yeah,
exactly.
so we had to, yeah. So it was that. It was like so sitting here doing it. It was like, we actually thought about that, and you're right on. That's what it was. And like I said, coming to the brisket, I'm like, this is the bulk of the book. And not even in poem and lengthwise, but it's all important. But this is what we're here for.
Yeah.
So, and when you go to that barbecue spot, that's what you're there for. So I was like, yeah, let me give this to you.
It's an incredible contribution. I mean, I think about so many poems, between all of us as we were growing up, and there are poems that you read so many years ago that I still think about. I mean, I remember when you first dropped My Last Will and Testament.
Oh man.
And I think that might have been 2006 or
yeah. It was
seven
about
or
yeah.
something like that. And I still think about that poem. Like I still think about that poem, and just how many folks that poem could speak for,
Yeah.
And so yeah,
Like
you
this could
just
very
never
well
know.
be my last will and testament. And when it comes to death, I'm not stressed in it. I'm not. It was like, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that might be on YouTube too. I think I actually want to like find that because I actually, how we grow as people, as writers, but something about it's like a Whitney Houston song, right? To me,
Yeah.
I will always love you will always be a classic.
Exactly.
That's just it. That's just
Yes.
Betty Wright After the Pain will always be a classic, right? It's
Yes.
just things like that. So, some things, some poems I've outgrown, but I do look back on some poems where I'm like, oh, it's no outgrowing this. This poem goes with you. This poem doesn't matter if it
Exactly.
was written 10 years ago. So I would agree with you. You bring that back up. Like I actually, because right now I would front on my old poems. Like people be like, listen to this like Candyland. Shut up, don't play that. Like, no, some poems I really got to be like, yo, you kind of carried me. And my last will and testament, I did it at I think the Talib Kweli show when,
Right.
he up 8 hours late. So I think I did that there. So that poem, like, it started to define my career,
Yeah.
it started to be the poem that made people believe like, oh, she might have it. Yeah. So I might have to go to the archives, pull that up and get on the
stage. That
stage.
was like pre-Sprite commercial, all the things, right? That
was before college money. That was just going to a room and it's like, all right, what y'all want me to do? My last
but it was so prophetic, right? It was, I mean, to have this young early 20s stand up there, really kind of new onto the poetry scene at that time, and going like, if this could be I could be delivering you all my eulogy right now. Yeah. And I was just like, I'm still to this day, I'm blown away by like that type of foresight.
And then doesn't it come full circle though? Because now this whole project about death and grief, and maybe it's something that I never ran from. Maybe I was always there, and maybe I just didn't recognize it. So maybe I was already setting myself up for what was to come. Yeah, I want to find that moment.
You want to know? So this is the thing. This is the thing that we have in common in that regard. I was thinking about like the digital conversion piece I did around the same time, and the fact that I've been working in like
already doing it,
resisting like digital surveillance and all these other things.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I said like, I didn't know when they converted our TVs, and I was so outraged by it that this would be like the life trajectory that I take.
Banger too, yeah. Like, wow.
So yeah, it's hilarious to think about those things. It's like we get these instincts and we don't know that it's a real defining moment.
Yeah. But the real part though is that it's real. It's like when you think about what you were saying in that poem, I wasn't writing about that type of stuff. Nobody was writing about that type of stuff, right? So it was like, what is she talking about? What's in the TV? It was on my TV and they're gonna put me in and all of this. Like, okay, but I mean, in bars though, but also like what's in here? But it's like, it's in your heart, right? It's like,
Yeah.
this was always with me. This was always something I cared about. And that's how I look when I talked about, like, I used to write poems about grief. And then I started the science of grief. And I was like, it was in me. It was a bigger version of it. And now you're just doing a bigger version of like what you started doing in poetry. Cause sometimes, I mean, the poems can always, do what they have to do. But sometimes there's bigger things that you could do with, with the story. Now it's not like, it doesn't always fit in the poem. So yeah, 10, 15 years ago, we were writing these in these little poems, but now it's like, oh no, that's what you actually care about in the world. And that's, you actually just kind of writing your future. And for some
Exactly.
reason you follow in that lane, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, I do this for real. Like,
Right. Right. And then didn't think about the poem for so many years. And then just last year, I was like, whoa,
yeah, I can't believe
okay.
you still perform that poem. I'm like, it's still there. Like, it's just,
It's like
yeah.
it still has work to do.
Yeah. And Tyree is probably like, Mom, you didn't, I could have told you that 20 years ago. It's like, okay.
Of course. And that's exactly what he would say too.
Yeah, he was just, you should have been knew that. Everybody knew that but you. I'm like, okay. Thank you.
Speaking of our babies, mine is graduating law school next
Oh my
month.
God, I
It's
just can't.
unbelievable.
I do you think I told you I still remember you just like, you know what, T, I'm gonna be running a little late. Can you grab Tyree from elementary? Oh, yeah. And now you're talking about law school. Is
Right. It's a
yeah.
trip. And let's talk a little bit about Lito. I mean, like just brilliant. You all just did a spread, right? Like a
Yeah,
Mother's Day
we did.
spread. I was just seeing that. I didn't get a chance to read it or anything, but
Yes. So Shinola was doing this year a traditional and non-traditional Mother's Day catalog, which I really appreciate. It was like
mhm.
moms come in different packages. Moms can be aunties, moms can
Yeah.
be cousins. Like, people are raising these little amazing humans who didn't birth them, and then some, there was some actual moms in it as well. And they just called us up like, can you and your nephew do it? I attribute it to, he grew up to be like this. I hate to give him compliments, but just hands right. I'm like, oh, you're actually cute. Like the other day I was on FaceTime with somebody and my cousin, and she was like, is that Carlito in the backseat? And I was like, yeah. She like, girl, I thought your brother was just, his spirit was back there or something. Like
He looks, I mean, they're exactly like him.
your daddy's son for sure. And I know you should. A lot of people look like their parents, but I'm like, no,
But
you
no.
are your parents. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was very, they called us up and we go do this shoot, and we probably take like 500 pictures. Here's the thing about Carlito. He's brilliant, so
Yeah.
he can do whatever it is that he wants to do. He's never done like a big photo shoot, but we in there just killing a photo shoot. Now me, I'm a professional at it at this point, right? Is what I do. Go show up, take a picture. But he's killing it. And I'm like, okay, you need to calm down because my job, not yours. And they're just up there, but he's also like, not, he's a D, but he needs to take a break and he needs some water and he needs some snacks and he needs a nap. And he's just, okay, so he's like, he is authentically himself,
Yeah.
so yeah, so they were like, let's do it. And then we, are one of like the centerfolds of the magazine. And I'm gonna actually frame those pictures as like, some free family pictures for us. Of like, oh, we didn't have to take pictures for years. We're gonna put them up in the house. But
Nice.
yeah, so in that spread, and on the blog, I just really talk about, all the things you already know, that, it wasn't an easy journey.
Mhm.
I've been in Carlito's life since he was 3 days old. So
Yeah.
I've always been that third co-parent. You think about when my brother was, murdered, and I'm really hard on Carlito for it. Not hard on him, but trying to get him to understand, like, yo, bro, I risked my life for you. A few months before my brother was murdered, if you remember, we weren't speaking.
Yeah.
And we got into it because he was downstairs and he was at my mom's house. They remember like it was yesterday. He was trying to get my nephew to read, and my nephew was just struggling with whatever words it was. My brother, again, he had his other personalities. And he started to just yell at my nephew. But I knew a lot of the frustration was my brother was getting indicted before he was murdered.
Yeah.
So he said to me one time, I would rather die than go back to jail.
Mm.
And I was, sadly enough, it happened. But so I run downstairs and I'm like, my brother, you're big.
Right.
Be like, you got me coming, leave him alone. I'm gonna fight you. I'm a blah, blah, push me up into the wall. He didn't shut up, get out and call it. We had this whole thing.
Right.
And then he would just, I was still raising the son though. So like I remember on Halloween, me and him wasn't talking, but me and Carlito in the house, like this is the year we bloody Smurfs, we putting our stuff on, we going outside, he walking past us like, hey Carlito, not saying nothing to me, but we going trick or treat with his son.
Right.
So, but we weren't talking, and it was because of Carlito, but not because of Carlito, obviously because of what we went through. But it's just, like I have always been willing to risk my life for you. And I was even choosing you over, my brother, because you the one, you know what I'm saying? So it's amazing. It's an amazing journey, but it was a sad journey. His mother is in prison right now. She's been in there for 5 years right now. Carlito has been through a lot of unimaginable things.
For a child.
Yeah.
For anyone.
For anyone, I remember showing up one day to pick him up from his auntie's house, and he told me, I'm like, where you at? He told me, I'm at the grocery store. I'm like, why? He told me, because I'm grocery shopping. And I'm like, you get your ass out there crawling around. So he come out with the bags. He was about to walk him home. I'm like, what are you doing? So these moments where he is like, he's grown. For me, I try to treat him like you still my baby. So, you don't deserve to grow up too fast. So with me and him, it's like, we kick it on a level like me and you kick it, because he's funny as hell. And he tell me, he like, Auntie, and I tell his my biggest compliment. He like, Auntie, you are so funny. He like, I don't know how you always do it, so, but he's funny. So we vibe and we joke, but then he's a baby. He texts me, he says like, hey Auntie, you had a good show. I watched it on YouTube, or, it was live, but I know I got to go to bed at 11. Can you come home, watch a movie with me before I go to bed? And, he's so it's that. So I'm giving him those moments like, no, I know that you're growing up. He's a preteen. He's going to be a teenager this year. I know that you're growing up.
Unbelievable.
You talking about Tyree graduated from law school? Yes. Carlito is now about to be a teen, a third.
Wow.
So he's getting the pimples on his nose. He don't understand it, and he's closing the shower door. He doing the teenager thing. But I'm still making sure that he has that space and that time to feel tender, to feel loved, to feel cared for. This is your dinner. This is your bedtime. Brush your teeth. Let me take you to get your hair cut. You're not out here on your own. Your dad is gone. I know your mother is coming back, but you have never been alone, and you will never be alone. So, at this stage in our life, it's just, it's funny. I watched you parent for so long. I watched you do it with Tyree. I watched you do it, alone outside of the village that you had. And for me, it's crazy, because I never thought I was just being a parent without knowing I was a parent. And now, like, even this year, setting in, like, wait, you 12-year-old, you actually have been a parent. Like, you've been a parent teacher
for a long time.
To Hawaii, you change diapers, you are a whole ass parent, and you don't even know you're doing it. For me, I was just like, oh, it's something I have to do, until I realized, like, oh shit, you got a whole kid over there in that room. Like, you got to wake him up at school. You got to talk to the teacher. So it's wild, but it's, hopefully his mom comes home this year and get her son for a minute. But other than that, like, I'm having fun with it. He's at a hotel party right now. I just went crazy yesterday. He went to a hotel party, and then he didn't call me the next morning. And then I woke up. He didn't call me. I didn't call him 8 times. I didn't call the hotel 20 times. I didn't FaceTime the mama he was with 8 times. I didn't call his cousins, his other cousins, his grandma. And then when they responded 12 minutes later, they was like, oh.
12 minutes later.
Yeah. They was like, we was just asleep. He like, you're embarrassing. I'm like, yep, I am. I'm sorry.
Listen, you remember Tyree was 7 and he was at childcare with a cell phone, because I was like, I need to be able to reach him. I'm sorry.
Look, Tyree, I'm glad you grew up and got your business. Nobody would let you do nothing. He was like, no, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Look, he's 25 and he still got to check in every night. So he don't even live in this state.
Mom, I'm here. I'm all right. So I I didn't pick up these habits from nowhere. Like,
right. So, we're coming to the end of this incredibly powerful, important, necessary dialogue with my true sister and friend. And I'm wondering if you want to take us out with, what do you want? Is there a particular poem you like to leave us with? And then when you end that poem, please tell people how to get your book, how to donate to you, how to book you for events, all those things.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So I think this is usually the poem that I take most shows out on. And I think that the reason I do this is because it honestly, to me, is the most important poem in my journey of grief. I wouldn't even say the book. I would just say my whole journey. I remember like it was yesterday. I'm sure that you remember it as well. You know, night that my brother was killed was earth shattering for me. But it was also the first time that I had experienced grief that was beyond sadness. I didn't know what this feeling was. I didn't know what to do with it. It had turned me into so many different people. But I realized that when I got just a little clear from that moment that we're all affected and inflicted with something. And I was I just was being shitty to people. Like, and I didn't know it. I wasn't intentional. And it was like, I could have done better. And I wrote this poem dedicated to that because I like to talk about how I learned. It's called I Learned of Grief Too Late. I learned that grief will humble you, that there's not enough success in the world to make you forget that your loved ones are dead. I've been an asshole to all of my friends since my brother died. There's a girl in Detroit that I hadn't talked to in 3 years prior to the night that he was murdered, and she still showed up to the crime scene before his body was even removed from the concrete. She drank her liver into the darkest of holes and listened to the song Drunk in Love with Me for like 56 days straight. And the first time I felt well enough to go outside sober and sleep in the dark alone again, I stopped answering her calls. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know, even though there's a really good excuse, I know sometimes we become the haunted and the hunter, the monster that we are running from and the monster that we are becoming. I know that your phone has been ringing nonstop since your overdose, since your mother passed, since your relapse, since your lover left, since the moment it happened, and you've been hitting the ignore button and telling yourself that nobody cares about you. And I get it. Grief is so much more contagious than joy. It seems easier to hand our baggage to people we love, then move freely through the world. It's the reason I left my mother at home to mourn the death of her only son alone while I went on the road to perform poems to strangers, because hurt people is so damn cliche, but true. So you blame anything on the dead. You become the excuse and the excuse, the burning building and the fire, expecting to be rescued while left alone, until you are left alone, until you can no longer blame your behavior on your pain, until you have to be good to your friends again and you send apologies years too late, until you hear someone you love say that they can't forgive you and you feel success and emptiness in the same body, until you are humbled, until you realize that you are not the only one. We are all hurting. And as a result, we are hurting each other, until you learn to be grieving and gracious, until you learn that this shit was never just about you.
Wow.
So I think that kind of sums up my journey. Yeah, I thank you for this. Again, with Butcher, these are the conversations that I wanted to have. I didn't want it to just be a book of poems that I gave to people and just read poetry. I actually wanted to have conversations and dialogue about my whole journey. So this is one of my favorite conversations. And I'll be sure to post it. You can find me anywhere. Natasha T. Miller. I just hit 10K on Instagram. So I'm like really excited about that because I finally got a feature. So Natasha T. Miller on Instagram, Natasha T. Miller on Facebook and Twitter and all those things. I'm more active on Instagram, but go to Button Poetry and buy the book, unless you want to buy the book directly from me, and I'll sign it and send it to you. But yeah, drive those sales up so I can get another contract with Button Poetry. But also buy the book because you're looking to share in the story and in the journey, not just because I'm trying to get that $20.
But also give that $20. And if people want to just make a random donation to you, like they just want to donate.
Oh, I am T Miller Poet on Cash App. Just $ T Miller Poet. I love random donations. I'm like, oh, $5 for my Cash App? Okay, I'm gonna use that. So Carlito's Frappuccino. So I'm a Black woman and I'm working. Most of the things that come in, especially financially, just like you, it's all a circle. You give it to me and I'm probably at some point gonna give it to somebody else. So, and
as you always do.
Keep coming.